It's a week one rematch, but boy, it's been a long time since week one. What's up, Bears fans? What's up, Vikings fans? It is Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Vikings fans, Bears fans, welcome in to a Crossover Thursday episode here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcasting network, and that is thanks to listeners every day like you. This Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. My name is Luke Braun. I cover the Vikings here with Lorin Cox. He covers the Bears here on the Locked On Podcast Network. How have things been in the last couple months for you, Lorin?
Yeah, two very different directions of the team right now. in the short term, you talk about the last month, the Bears winning, what is it, 6 out of their last 7 games to be at
white hot Chicago Bears, and the Vikings are in constant chaos. That's where we're at.
But like the thing about the white hot Chicago Bears is like all but one of all but one of those wins, and certainly the last 6 in a row, or the last 5 in a row, have been by one score. No, except for the Saints game. But like this past week against the Giants, they win by 4. They beat the Bengals by 5. Before that, they beat the Commanders and Raiders by 1 point each. Like there's a certain feeling of like, not necessarily that the Bears have just been quote unquote lucky, but that it might not be sustainable to keep pulling it out of their butts in the fourth quarter like this.
If you need some ammo to argue with Peter Bukowski about fraudulent close win teams, you can just find any show of mine from 2022. We have stood where you stood, my friend. We know the feeling. Here's what I said about the Vikings back then, and I guess I'll now I can apply it to you guys. Is like I did a crossover with Joe Marino. We played the Bills that year, and I love what he said. He said, "You don't give them back. You don't have to give them back." And at a certain point, it doesn't matter if you sustain it, right? 6-3, 500 from here on out would probably not be defined as sustaining the success, and it would put you at 10-7, and you're in the playoffs. You've already kind of gotten ahead, and that's what it means. But it does mean that going into a game like this still feels like anything can happen, and that's where I've been at with the Vikings. Is truly you could get anything. They could go toe to toe with the contending Lions, or they can, pee down their legs and embarrass themselves on national TV against the Chargers in back-to-back weeks. Who knows what's going to happen? You could get an amount of false starts not seen since Obama was still a new politician on the scene. Or, you could end up, JJ McCarthy could have a career day and, get 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, who knows? No idea what happens now. And if they do screw it up, they'll screw it up in a way that you cannot possibly predict. That's been the kind of the nature of the Vikings. But I mean, it's still very much like this will be the 5th game of JJ McCarthy. And it'll be the 27th game the Vikings have played since they drafted him. That dissonance is starting to get to people. And he was hurt, and those injuries are no longer a part of the equation. But it feels a little bit like if, Caleb Williams was doing what J.J. McCarthy has done in the last few weeks, you'd be deeply concerned. If he did that week 4 last year, you give it a little bit more leeway. And so there's this tension here between all of that stuff. But really what that's doing is papering over all of the things that are wrong in Minnesota with the way that the offense is constructed, with some wrinkles in the defense that have kind of only ever been hidden but not really solved. And we can get to all of that, but all that has led to a team that, like, if you have the right tools, you can find you can find the holes in the defense. You can find the opportunities to mess up the offense. If you don't have the right kind of tools, you might get smoked. And I draw a difference between like the Eagles and the Lions, 2 very good teams, but the Eagles had the right kind of tools. The Lions didn't, and the Lions struggled quite a bit more, even though they were at home for their game. So the Vikings truly are turning into this wild card team. But when you cover a wild card team week to week, you look up and you're below 500.
And that's what scares me the most coming into this matchup is like, I think the Vikings are 3-point favorites in this game, but like, this feels like anything could happen kind of game. And I think we saw that in like a microcosm in week 1 when these two teams played, right? Where for 3 quarters, the Bears, I don't want to say dominated, but like McCarthy.
Oh, you can say that. It was a total butt kicking for 3 quarters, but then it was an equal and opposite collapse.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that feels like what we've seen from the Vikings this season, right? Where like they can get dominated for a bunch of a game, and they could also have these stretches of brilliance like we saw in the fourth quarter of that game, where all of a sudden McCarthy could do nothing wrong and the defense figured out everything the Bears were trying to do offensively, and Chicago was left with no answers. And so that's when I come into this game saying, well, last week the Bears were down 20-10 to the Giants in the fourth quarter and had to have a miracle to come back. So can I be super confident that they're going to come in and really enact revenge on a struggling or a down Vikings team right now that just beat the Lions 2 weeks ago? Like, no, I think there's a lot to be concerned about for Chicago, despite how much confidence they have certainly built. It feels like there's a much better Bears team right now than they were in week 1. And yet I'm not any more confident in the results.
Well, how do we feel about Ben Johnson right now as a play caller? Now that you've seen a good sample of him, and you've seen it go well and go poorly, and you've seen kind of a little bit more of what the plan is supposed to be with Caleb Williams. Because last time we talked, we had no idea what is he going to do with this quarterback that's so different than the guy he was working with in Detroit. Now you know. So how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think there's generally been a lot to really like, and he's been definitely not perfect, right? There's been growing pains along the way, and there've been a couple of games here and there where it's like that maybe wasn't Ben Johnson's best game in terms of giving the offense a lot of options. I mean, even this last week against the Giants, it felt like he was getting away from the running game a little bit too much, and that's something that has happened occasionally, but there've been other games where they'll hand it off 30-35 times and really go all in on that side of the ball. So I think there is still like a feeling things out, but he's done a good job of kind of, for the most part, adapting to the game situation and the opponent to say, okay, right now we're going to need to hand the ball off, 8 of these 10 plays on this next drive, because that's just how either this opponent is defending us or how right now we're just not blocking it up well enough in the passing game. So we got to go to the running game and vice versa. Like, okay, we're trailing and we need to get this passing game going so we can dial up some stuff and get Caleb into a rhythm pretty quickly when they need to. But it's been more about like really doing it for 4 full quarters. That outside of the Dallas game against Eberflus's terrible defense, I don't think we've seen the Bears offense really be, I guess the Bengals game too, against 2 of the worst defenses in football. They've done it for 4 quarters, but like this Vikings game feels like a real test in terms of like, hey, you're going to get challenged a little bit more here by Flores. Can you sustain it a little bit better?
Yeah, we played the Bengals at home and Carson Wentz was humming. You're going to have to do more than that. Yeah, like I wonder where are Bears fans falling on all that, because like what the Bears have done is squeak by some of these teams that if you're a real contender, you shouldn't be squeaking by. But I mean, for me, I always fight against that on my show when it comes to that. There's no cupcakes in the NFL. There's no Alabama State that you can go hang 55 on and have a nice little tune up before the real games against the real SEC teams. Like there's no such thing as that. But I know a lot of people. So like, what does it feel like this Bears win streak is just a product of poor competition? And honestly, the way the Vikings have been playing, I don't know if a win this week changes that narrative. Or is this something that, when it's time to go host the Lions, when it's time to go play the Packers? I don't think either of us have had a Packers game yet, right? Like when those games come up, are you going to feel like they're ready to rise to a more challenging team than, New York or Las Vegas?
Yeah. So I think that there's a pretty good confidence level in the offense that Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams and company, like maybe it's going to have to take a couple of fourth quarter touchdowns, but like they'll get you to your 24 points, when they need to. But it's really a big kind of the big Achilles heel for a lot of the season is like, they get turnovers against bad quarterbacks that bail them out a lot, but when they don't against good opposing offenses, then the offense can't keep up at that point. And so like they don't have a good enough pass rush, and they've had a ton of injuries in the secondary, and they just, Dennis Allen can manufacture some blitz here and there, but like it's not good enough for the great or for the good teams that they're going to face as the schedule goes on. But like a quarterback like JJ McCarthy might be a volatile enough quarterback that they could get a turnover or 2. But the Bears have had multiple games this season that they've won where they've only forced 1 punt by the opposing team, like that
because of the turnovers, or just because it's like a shootout. Well, I guess you had like the Bengals shootout, crazy Flacco game.
Yeah, no, I mean, so like there was the Bengals game was a little bit more shootout, but the rest of it, but against the Raiders and the Commanders, I think were both 1 punt games by the opponents, because every drive was touchdown, field goal, or turnover, and they've held more field goals than probably I'm giving them credit for right now. But like it's not a there's real issues on defense that they have struggled with here. And Jackson Dart ran all over them. Mobile quarterbacks in particular have been an issue. And so there's not like a solution of like, oh, they can just tweak this or this. I mean, until Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon come back from injured reserve, that's kind of the only thing in the horizon that Bears fans are looking forward to.
Yeah, and maybe that's the mismatch. And it was the mismatch before, too, except the Vikings didn't have Jordan Addison. He was suspended before, and they didn't have Christian Darrisaw. So there are some differences from week one, and we are going to be able to get into all of that next on this crossover edition of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings and Locked On Bears is brought to you by Supply House. If you have a project coming up in your home, you have to look at Supply House to help yourself get organized. You can get moving forward with over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. And their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service can help you stay ahead of the curve. If you need parts fast, Supply House has next day delivery, and their part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every tiny little detail matters. You can join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off of your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the best way to play daily fantasy football. I have personally been a huge fan of PrizePicks for years. It's been my favorite way to get a little bit of extra fun. Right now, we have the NFL going on. We have the NBA going on. Shoot, we got hockey if you're into that. And you can mix and match anything you want. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least two player stats, and they can be anything. It can be Rome Odunze and Chicago Bull of your choice. I don't really watch basketball, so I can't name any Bulls. But you could put Justin Jefferson and Anthony Edwards together. Whatever it is, it takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And their new stacks feature is a game changer, so you can pick more on multiple stats for the same player. So you could get Caleb Williams rushing yards and Caleb Williams passing touchdowns in a stack. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Moving on here with Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm here with Lorin Cox, Locked On Bears. I'm Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bears and or Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day and helping us become the number one sports podcasting network. Lorin, this is a way different world than week one. And I do love when we get these division matchups like super spread out like this. Like you play week 2 and then week 17, because you get to see a cross section of how a team evolves and changes over a year. So often after a game, it feels like whatever happened in that game is the eternal state of affairs, right? You lose a bad one to the Vikings and it feels like the Bears will never get it together. But now you win a really exciting couple of games and it feels like the Bears are the clutchest hero team ordained by God, right? So what is the biggest difference from week 1 to now? And this isn't even as far as it could get, but from week 1 to now, what is the biggest thing that has changed that Vikings fans should know to expect to be different from that first game on Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I might cheat and put it in a couple different buckets here, but like, because like the one thing is just a little bit more like, hey, everyone's worked together now for 2 months, and so the timing is a lot more crisp in terms of anticipation from the quarterback to receivers, like just being on the same page. But I think like the bigger, I don't know if it's bigger, but like the more tangible thing is like the offensive line is playing worlds better. They could not run block for the first few weeks of the season. They didn't have much of a run identity. They couldn't figure out how they wanted to work that schematically. And they have found a lot more upfront, a lot more continuity. They've something about getting on the double teams, then getting off double teams to the second level and like maximizing that timing of like, how long do you stay at the first level? You don't want to go too soon, but you don't want to stay there too long. And they seem to have perfected that with time. And as a result, the Bears have been able to run block a lot better. DeAndre Swift is really opening up the running game, and backup rookie Kyle Monungai, 7th-round pick, has been a nice, like, it's been a very, 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 very poor man's version of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in Chicago.
Thunder and lightning. It's tale as old as time.
I'm trying to think of a good analogy there. It's not thunder and lightning. It's like a
static shock and somebody threw out the trash behind your.
Yeah, like a LARPer saying a lightning bolt. But anyway, like that's what DeAndre Swift is doing. But like, but then also pass protection's been better too. Like the left tackle is the big weakness still up front. They've changed left tackle since week 1. Like there's a noticeable difference.
Oh, who's the tackle now?
That's Theo Benedette, who was an undrafted rookie free agent last year out of British Columbia, who spent all of last year in reserve. He was not part of the 3-man left tackle battle at training camp, but eventually kind of got in the mix and has not been horrible, but has not been good, right? Like he's not been good, but like given that he's a complete no-name, he has done about as good as you could hope.
Yeah, but I mean, if that's become the strength that it was kind of supposed to be, it feels like that unit has gelled a little bit more, and it feels like Caleb has calmed down from what it was last year. At least it's my perception from afar of the Bears, is that Caleb's doing maybe even 2 in structure, and he's been a little bit more, disciplined about staying in the rules of the play, and then more judicious about when he decides to turn it into a scramble drill. Is that that's a vibe from afar. So tell me if I'm wrong.
So I don't know if it's more judicious. I think so. I do think he's being smarter about it, but like it doesn't feel like it's happening less. Like it doesn't feel like
maybe
he's
picking better spots. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's better at throwing it away and throwing the check down and knowing when to do that. But like he's still bailing out of the pocket and going into scramble drill at what feels like a relatively similar amount week to week. It just feels like they are working better. They're smarter decisions when he does, and he's not taking sacks nearly as often on those plays. Like he's avoiding negative plays and creating positive plays on those at a higher rate, but not necessarily, doing it less overall.
So for the Vikings, I would say the biggest difference is how much healthier the Vikings are. And at times this year, they had gotten much more injured than they were in week 1, but they were still missing Darisaw, and Addison wasn't an injury, but kind of same diff. And then, JJ McCarthy is hurt for a bunch of weeks, and you lose literally everybody on the line has missed at least 1 game, except Will Fries, who has been up and down. And you had a point in London against the Bears or against the Browns. They had 4 backups in, and it wasn't even all second teamers. They had third teamers in there. They still have a third teamer at center, sort of by their own choice, I guess, even though their backup is healthy. They've decided to start the guy that hasn't snapped before. He learned how to snap on the fly on a field in London. That was the first time he ever snapped, is Blake Brandel. He's the Oklahoma State tackle that moved to guard that's now a center. And that's been kind of causing its own whole host of issues. But Ryan Kelly's 21-day window opened on Wednesday. So maybe he comes back, and maybe we're past that. Addison's back, Hawkinson's healthy, Jefferson's healthy, Naylor is healthy. Naylor and Jefferson were both dealing with injuries all of camp that I think maybe we're still bugging them in Soldier Field. This has kind of come back together. The only one that we're probably going to be missing right now, the only DNP on the practice report, is Jonathan Grenard, which is huge. He's the guy that got that game-ending sack in Soldier Field last year, or not get the one in overtime that kind of ruined the overtime possession. And he's our best pass rusher, so that's a huge loss. And how they replace him with a smattering of Dallas Turner and off-ball linebacker Eric Wilson lining up at edge, because we're that smart. We're Max Brain in it here. Is probably the difference, but that's a far cry from where we were earlier in the season, where you were missing 12 starters at times. Now it's all right. You're missing a couple of important people. You're probably always going to be missing a couple of important people in November, but now, quarterback's back. All of his favorite targets are back. He has most, if not all, of his O-line. And this is supposed to be closer to what this thing was supposed to look like. The problem is the Vikings have taken a very long-term development angle to JJ McCarthy. And that means that that they are not truncating things to facilitate better production. They are giving him everything and letting him screw it up and learn through it. And that has led to, I think, a worse offense than it would be if they gave him a little bit more training wheels. But the training wheels have been off, and they probably shouldn't be, and the bike is crashing. So you're seeing these super gaudy problems like having 8 false starts last week. And ultimately, I mean, if we want a key to the game here, I'll say the same thing every week probably is penalties and turnovers. You have to limit that, and then limiting the turnovers. They lose the turnover battle 3-0. Brian Flores' defense has not generated turnovers the way it has in the past. They had the one game against the Bengals, and otherwise they got, well, I don't remember if there was one in the Bears game. I think there was one at the very end that barely counted. That was like on the stupid lateral play that technically was a fumble. Like, who cares? And then they go like a big, long drought before they get a couple. They get a fumble against the Lions, and then like one other one, and like that's it. So they've had a really tough time winning the turnover battle. If they can do that, this immediately becomes a much better outlook than the Vikings have had in a whole bunch of their other games.
Yeah, I think I saw that the Vikings are like -7 in turnover differential, and the Bears are plus 14. So it's to be a huge factor here, and
it doesn't feel fluky. It doesn't feel like this will regress thing for the Vikings. Like, they're sloppy with the football, and they aren't very aggressive on defense at taking the ball, except for going for peanut punches, which makes them terrible tacklers. It's rough over here, man. It's rough.
Well, and I feel your penalty pain. The Bears have had an absolute massive amount of every single week. It feels like a couple false starts and a couple holds. Until last week against the Giants, the Bears had their best penalty game. You had 3 penalties for 25 yards. So there's big storyline this week is like, have they solved the snap count issues, or was it just one good week? But hey, we'll be back to it, against the Vikings because they're going to be peeing their pants with Brian Flores showing blitz all the time.
But will he? Because he didn't against Ben Johnson last time. It's so funny that this is going to be like the snap count issues game. We currently have, I saw somewhere the refs that we get are like the least flag happy refs. They swallow the flag a lot, so maybe the guys will be allowed to play, which probably favors the Bears. Because the way, if you're the Bears, you probably want to cover Jefferson and Addison really physically, and if the refs are swallowing the flag, you can get away with murder back there. And you can probably disrupt a lot.
I'm not sure that that's going to make a difference for Nashawn Wright on the outside there. And maybe
look, he got the pick 6, all right? He got his get back.
And he's going to be riding that to his next contract next year for some other team, but it's not going to be much else in Chicago.
The Vikings fans need to see him give up a couple, because that was horrible to endure. And it's it's nice that they won that game, because if they didn't, all we would hear about was the practice squad corner that picked off our golden boy quarterback.
Well, don't worry. He has not been – he's had a couple good – he'll have good moments like that, but, as any inconsistent corner, you're going to be able to get a few off of him. But, you'll be able to get a few off Tyreek Stevenson. You'll get a few off of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, the new starting slot cornerback.
Oh, let's go.
There's
let's get a fight.
I'm into it. He's been the classic beloved when he's on your team, and you hate him when he's on the other team, because he's been a real weapon for the Bears, especially as a blitzer and a pass rusher. Had a couple sacks through his first few games.
I can't wait to find out who throws up. I'm assuming you're going to do other shows, and I need them to ask you I need you to ask that other shows who's going to throw, who CJGJ is going to get to throw a punch.
I asked the Bengals guys, and they didn't have a great answer, but I'm hoping somebody gets under his skin this week.
We'll see. Justin Jefferson was hot last week. If he gets mugged a bunch again and doesn't get the flags he wants, he could be a little bit spicy. But hey, here's the thing. We've got both of our second-year quarterbacks. These two teams have been in lockstep in their rebuilds for the last 4 years, so everybody always wants to know. So let's talk about how these quarterbacks are coming along and the progression of those quarterbacks next on the Crossover Thursday episode. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Betterhelp. The days are getting shorter, it's getting dark faster, and that can mess with your mood. It's important to reach out to those that you care about and those that you love, and I hope that list includes yourself. So take care of yourself, and a great way to take care of yourself and your mental is to get into therapy. I'm a huge proponent of it. I've been going to therapy whether I'm feeling great or a crisis or no matter what is going on for years and years now, and it has helped me so much to just maintain a decent mental baseline to deal with whatever comes up in my day. And BetterHelp can help you get started. Don't wait to reach out, whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself. BetterHelp makes it easy to take that first step. Listeners get 10% off of their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Because taking that step towards support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? Moving on here with Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears, crossover Thursday with Locked On Vikings. I'm Luke Braun. This is going to be the matchup for years, I would think. Of Williams versus McCarthy. Even if JJ McCarthy doesn't get better, he'll still be around for a while. They're going to give this the time to kind of run its course. And I'll start with the story of JJ McCarthy. Bears fans, if you haven't paid attention, the story of this year has kind of gotten suspended in midair when McCarthy got his high ankle sprain on Sunday Night Football. He has a horrible game against Atlanta. Everybody plays terribly in Atlanta. Or in that game against Atlanta, was a home game. And so week 3, you're comparing what you saw with Carson Wentz, and it's the Bengals game that Jake Browning dissolves in. And you're comparing that, you're coming off this crazy blowout win, and you're comparing that to what happened on Sunday Night Football. So it kind of feels like that bad week 2 game also happened a little bit in week 3. And it also happened a little bit in week 4, 5, and after the bye. This will be JJ McCarthy's 5th start in his career. It will be the 27th game since they drafted JJ McCarthy. That has, I think, gotten to people where whatever happened in the 4th game, you're thinking about it like, man, we've had this dude for 26 games and he's still, coming along this much. But like, yeah, he didn't really practice in either of the off seasons because one was like draft process and rookies very famously can't get a lot of like development in. And then the other one, he was rehabbing a knee, right? So he hasn't really had the off seasons. He's had 2 training camps and like no real weeks of practice, except like from the week leading up to that Bears game. It was a short week because of the Monday night game. And then he missed one of those practices with the birth of his son. Then he was injured. And he didn't actually fully practice for a week again until the Lions game, which also turned into, funny enough, the exact same stat line: 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and a 27-24 win, which is hilarious that it landed that exactly. But it kind of felt like this whole year we've just been sitting there twiddling our thumbs waiting for the JJ McCarthy thing to start. And now that it has started and sputtered out the gate a little bit, but he's still shown plenty of really good, fun stuff. There's still all kinds of fun plays, really cool go balls down the sideline, quick processing here and there, but it hasn't been consistent. For every good go ball, there's one that he sails. For every nice, oh my God, he ripped that into such a tight window, he throws one he shouldn't and it's intercepted. For every good scramble, there's a bad sack. And so it's that inconsistency. The Vikings have been very adamant. This is part of the development process. We expected this, but people are running out of patience with he's developing, be patient when you're on week 27. And they're not taking the mentality they're taking a 27-week mentality into game 5. And so you're getting quite a lot of debate there. For me personally, it's coming along. It's there. I can point out all the things that are wrong, and I have on my Patreon page. If Bears fans want to check it out, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. And I've pointed out all of those things, but they are all really rooted in low experience. So if you can attack that, you get them. But tell me about how Caleb Williams has differed from the last couple of times we saw him, especially last year, but even week 1.
Yeah, there's a growing, I think, confidence and decisiveness really in what he's doing in this Bears offense now that just hasn't been there, where regardless of what the final decision is, he's getting to it more quickly. And it was never like, or it was rarely like a truly like a progression issue of like, he's not seeing the field fast enough. It's like when he sees it, like trusting it and going forward with it, whether it's gripping and ripping it or deciding to just throw the check down or deciding to just throw it away or deciding to scramble. Like he's getting there and saying, all right, this is what I got to do. And I'm just going to do it because this is the best thing I can do in this moment. Even if, hey, maybe there is a guy who's deep downfield who I could stop and try and crank it deep while I'm rolling out in the flat. But like, I know I can scramble for this first down and it's 3rd and 5 and my team just needs this first down. Like he's been able to just be more confident in saying, hey, I'm just going to take what's here and trust that it'll be enough, or that the receiver will make a play, or that Ben Johnson will have something for us. And I think that trust in the system is where we've seen the most growth and confidence from him. We're still going to see, a couple of inaccurate passes here and there where he just misses on a guy. And then, quarterbacks miss throws sometimes. Sometimes he rushes it a little bit and then doesn't set his feet properly, or just the mechanics aren't quite there. But generally, he hasn't put it in harm's way. He's not making bad decisions with the ball. Even his, turnover-worthy throws are more like he puts it a little bit behind a receiver who has a corner trailing. And it was like, no, it was a good decision if he had put the ball where he was supposed to. It just didn't, mechanically didn't go where it needs to go. And he's generally been someone who is, I don't want to say doing all the right things, but like is more often being let down by those around him than letting down those around him.
Yeah, and so here's what I've wanted to ask you too about this, because the Bears are now ahead of where the Vikings were in their QB development because JJ McCarthy has missed so much time. And, the debate is, should you treat this for McCarthy as year 1 or year 2 or something in between or whatever? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, we are treating this like year 1. And we look at that first year as a total lost year. Yeah, he memorized the playbook really well, but really he was rehabbing a knee. He's not really working on his game. Which appears to be closer to the truth than the opposite, because it doesn't seem like a lot of progress got made in that year, which is disappointing. From your year 1 to your year 2, does it feel like the outlook has changed, or do you feel like you're still just kind of on the same track, or like coming off of last year, it feels like the vibes around Caleb Williams were deteriorating, and then the big expose comes out and all that. Do we have a different emotion now? And I'm asking this specifically in the context of, like, by this point in 2026, is there a world for the Vikings to feel a lot different than they feel right now?
I think the hard disconnect between this comparison, right, is switching to Ben Johnson as the head coach for year 2. Right?
True. Yeah, very true.
As McCarthy, by all accounts, will have the same system and be in year 3 of knowing the knowledge of the system.
Hey, you ask some fans, we might be doing something. I don't know.
Same with the Packers, I guess. It's crazy out here right
That's
now.
Actually closer to real.
Yeah.
Some might go down there.
But
I can't wait to talk to Peter this year.
Oh, it's gonna be great. But no, so like for Caleb, I do think for Bears fans, I don't know that the reputation was souring that much. Like, I don't know that the path has changed, right? Like, I still think this is just, we saw flashes of this from Caleb last season, and now he's just doing it more consistently because he's got a coach and a system that's putting him in much better positions to succeed. And the offensive line is better, and they've added weapons to help him in that process. Like, so in a lot of sense, it does feel like it's largely a continuation from the same path, but like it got accelerated a little bit more with the likes of Ben Johnson. And I think we kind of had to adjust expectations down a bit during the Eberflus era and then kind of turn them back up a little bit now for Caleb, where now it's like, hey, your number 1 overall pick, you got to be better than this in some of these moments. Like, hey, now the bar's back up here, when after last year was kind of like, okay, we got to be patient with him because so many things are wrong. And now, hey, everything's a lot better. So now you got to be a lot better. And he's really starting to grow into that the last handful of weeks.
3-point spread on FanDuel. Vikings favored at home despite being 2 games behind the Bears in the division. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's appropriate or not? Or
yeah, I think it's totally appropriate. This is an absolute coin flip game to me, just because the Vikings are so unpredictable, and like the Bears have been so, again, not necessarily lucky per se, but just like so cutting it close so often that to me that this will be a big game health wise. Like, if Grenard doesn't play, and if Van Ginkel is still a little bit limited, and some of these other Vikings players on the report are under the weather, and then the Bears obviously have a long injury report, but if they're a little bit healthier, like the team who does better on the injury report this week might be enough to sway this game one way or the other. But I still lean Vikings figuring out a way that, like, McCarthy will maybe have a turnover or 2, but they'll still be able to get their points against this Bears offense or against this Bears defense, and the Bears will score some. I think it'll be a close game, but I need to see them beat the Vikings this year before I can like really trust that they're going to do it, because I don't know that the Vikings are in somewhat much worse position now than they were in week 1, and they still found a way to win that game. So like the Bears still have something to prove here, I think.
Yeah, I think it's too high on the Vikings, and I think the spread has mostly been too high on the Vikings. They, depending on when you got them at certain times, they're either 4-5 or 3-6 against the spread this year, and they're just giving, I think, a little bit too much grace for the problems the Vikings have had, because even the wins they've had have mostly been either ugly or Jake Browning. But It is a total wild card. I do think a pick'em would have been maybe more appropriate, which is closer to what it was the other time. So I guess Vegas just kind of still hasn't quite been convinced by the Bears and all these close wins against, lesser teams and stuff. But we'll see. And that's the beautiful thing is the game starts 0-0 and everybody gets an opportunity to prove the doubters wrong. Thank you so much, Lorin. Vikings fans, go check out Locked On Bears. Bears fans, you're welcome. Come on, hang out on Locked On Vikings. We will see you all on the other side. Thank you so much for listening to this Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network.